The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the mansion that stood proudly on Hillcrest Drive. Victor, Blackwell adjusted his Italian silk tie as he gazed out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. From this height, the people looked like ants, which suited Victor just fine. At 45, he had built an empire that allowed him to look down on everyone, both literally and figuratively. The doorbell echoed through the vast entryway. Victor checked his watch, 7:30 a.m. The cleaning service was right on time at least. He had fired the previous company last month when their staff had shown up 11 minutes late. In Victor's world, time was money, and he wouldn't tolerate anyone wasting either. "Mr. Blackwell?" called a soft voice from the doorway. "I am from Precision Cleaning Services." Victor turned to see a small woman standing with her hands folded in front of her. She wore the company's simple blue uniform and carried a large tote of cleaning supplies. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes remained fixed on the floor. "You're new," Victor said flatly, not bothering with a greeting. He walked closer, noting her worn shoes and the slight fray at the cuff of her uniform. "Where's the usual team?" "They sent just me today, sir. I am Elena Vasquez." Her English came out halting, the accent thick. "They say your house needs special attention." She fumbled with the words. Victor let out a short, humorless laugh. "Special attention? I pay for 3 cleaners twice a week. Company is short-staffed today. I work twice as hard, promise." Elena tried to smile, but Victor had already turned away, typing furiously on his phone. "Fine," he muttered. "Start upstairs. The bathrooms need to sparkle. Use the service elevator in the back. I don't want cleaning carts in my main hallway." Elena nodded and began to move toward the back of the house. Victor returned to his morning coffee, already dismissing her from his thoughts. People like her were background noise in his life, necessary but not worth noticing. 3 hours later, Victor walked through the upper floor to check on her progress. He found Elena carefully dusting his collection of crystal awards from various business magazines, naming him Entrepreneur of the Year and Most Innovative CEO. His footsteps made no sound on the thick carpet, so she didn't notice him watching as she delicately handled each award, wiping away every speck of dust. "That's worth more than you'll make in 5 years, Victor said sharply, causing Elena to jump slightly. "Be careful with it." "Yes, sir." "Very careful," Elena said, setting the award down gently. "These are very nice. You must be very smart businessman." "I didn't get where I am by luck," Victor said, straightening the award slightly to the left. "I built everything from nothing. That's something people like you wouldn't understand." Elena's expression flickered briefly, but she quickly lowered her eyes again. "I understand hard work, sir," Victor scoffed. "There's hard work and then there's smart work. Anyone can push a mop around." He walked around the room, running his finger along surfaces, checking for dust. Finding none, he moved to the bathroom where the marble countertops gleamed and the gold fixtures shone. "The shower glass still has water spots," he pointed out, though he had to look very closely to find them. "Do it again." "Yes, Mr. Blackwell, I fix right away." As Victor turned to leave, he noticed Elena's phone on the counter, an old model with a cracked screen. The lock screen showed a photo of a teenage girl in a school uniform, smiling proudly and holding a certificate. "Keep your personal belongings in your bag," he said coldly. "And don't waste time on your phone when you should be working." "Sorry, sir." "That is my daughter, Lucia. She wins school prize for math yesterday." Elena quickly tucked the phone away, but a hint of pride remained in her voice. "She very smart. Going to college someday." Victor raised an eyebrow. "College? That's ambitious. She works very hard. Studies every night. 2 jobs on weekend." "Well, I suppose someone has to serve coffee to the actual college students," Victor replied with a smirk. The light in Elena's eyes dimmed, but she simply nodded and returned to scrubbing the shower glass. Victor felt a twinge of something, not quite guilt, perhaps just awareness that his comment had hit its mark. He didn't care. People needed to be realistic about their place in the world. By afternoon, Victor was hosting a video call with international investors in his home office. Through the door, he could hear Elena vacuuming the hallway. The sound irritated him, breaking his concentration as he tried to explain the projected growth charts for his newest tech venture. He muted the call. "Can you do that later?" he snapped, opening the door. "I'm in the middle of something important." Elena immediately shut off the vacuum. "Sorry, sir. I finish other rooms first." Just, Victor waved his hand dismissively. Go clean somewhere else until I'm done. The kitchen or whatever. For the rest of the afternoon, Elena worked silently around the mansion, careful to stay out of Victor's way. Victor caught glimpses of her, wiping down the stainless steel appliances in the kitchen he rarely used, polishing the banisters of the grand staircase, carefully dusting the bookshelves filled with business books he'd bought but never read. As evening approached, Victor found her in the west wing, where several unused rooms gathered dust. She was cleaning the windows, her reflection ghostly against the darkening sky outside. The room contained furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts of a life never lived. Victor had bought the mansion 3 years ago, but many rooms remained unused, filled with expensive furniture chosen by his interior designer. I didn't ask you to clean in here, Victor said, startling her again. Schedule says all rooms. Sir. Elena gestured to the paper the company had given her. Even ones not used, Victor shrugged. Well, don't waste too much time. Nobody ever comes in here anyway. Elena nodded, continuing to wipe the window. Victor lingered, watching her methodical movements. There was something almost meditative about her work. Careful, thorough, patient. How long have you been in this country? He asked suddenly. Elena paused. 5 years, sir. And cleaning houses the whole time? No, sir. First, I work in restaurant kitchen, then factory. Cleaning pays better. She resumed her work, adding, better hours too. Can see my daughter more? Victor leaned against the doorframe. Where are you from originally? Small town in northern Mexico, sir. Near mountains. And what did you do there? Before you came here to clean toilets? The question came out more harshly than he'd intended, but Victor didn't correct himself. Elena's hand paused briefly in its motion. I had different life there, sir. She didn't elaborate, and Victor didn't press. People like her always had sob stories, and he wasn't interested. As she moved to another window, Elena stumbled slightly, knocking into an end table. A small crystal figurine wobbled dangerously close to the edge. Victor moved with surprising speed, catching the expensive piece before it fell. For God's sake, be careful, he snapped. This costs more than you make in a month. Elena stepped back, eyes wide. I'm very sorry, sir. My knee sometimes— I don't care about your knee, Victor cut her off. If you can't do the job properly, Precision should send someone who can. Please, Mr. Blackwell, I need this job. For the first time, Elena looked directly at him, her eyes meeting his. There was no anger there, only quiet determination. My daughter's school is expensive. She is very smart. As chance for scholarship next year. Victor set the figurine back carefully. Then I suggest you be more careful. One broken item and I'll have it deducted from your pay, or have you replaced entirely. Elena nodded, dropping her gaze again. Yes, sir. Thank you. As Victor walked away, he heard her resume cleaning, her movements even more careful than before. Something about their exchange left him unsettled. He wasn't used to people looking him in the eye that way, without fear or awe or resentment, just simple dignity. By the time Elena finished her work, the sun had set. Victor found her in the main foyer gathering her supplies. I am finished, Mr. Blackwell, she said quietly. Everything on list is done. Victor did a quick walkthrough looking for flaws. The place was immaculate, even better than when his regular team cleaned. Still, he couldn't bring himself to offer a compliment. The baseboards in the guest bathroom could use more attention next time, he said instead. And you missed a spot on the living room window. Elena nodded. I fix next time. 2 days from now? Yes, fine. Victor pulled out his wallet and extracted a $20 bill. For your daughter, he said, holding it out. For her? Math thing. Elena looked at the money, then at Victor. Something in her expression made him uncomfortable again. Not gratitude, but something like pity. After a moment, she accepted the bill with a small nod. Thank you, sir. As she turned to leave, Victor felt compelled to add, just so you know, I worked for everything I have. Nobody gave me handouts. Elena paused at the door. Life gives different challenges to different people, Mr. Blackwell. Her English seemed suddenly more fluid, her voice steadier. Some mountains harder to climb than others. Before Victor could respond, she was gone, leaving him standing alone in his vast, spotless, empty mansion. For a moment he felt a strange hollowness in the pit of his stomach. He quickly pushed the feeling aside. He had a wealth management meeting in the morning and contracts to review before bed. As he walked up the grand staircase to his master suite, Victor couldn't shake the image of Elena's eyes when she'd looked directly at him. There had been something there he rarely encountered, something he couldn't quite name, but that nonetheless left him feeling smaller than he had that morning. 2 weeks had passed since Elena began cleaning Victor's mansion. Despite her flawless work, Victor's attitude hadn't improved. If anything, he seemed to find more reasons to criticize her, as if determined to remind her of the vast gap between their worlds. On this particular Tuesday morning, heavy rain pounded against the mansion's many windows. Victor paced in his home office, speaking loudly on the phone about an upcoming business merger. Elena worked quietly in the adjacent music room, dusting the collection of expensive art pieces that Victor had acquired mainly to impress his visitors. The music room was Elena's favorite part of the mansion. Unlike the cold modern furniture in the rest of the house, this room had character. Rich mahogany bookshelves lined one wall, filled with records and music books that looked untouched. Paintings of orchestras and concert halls hung on the walls. And in the center of the room, positioned to catch the eye of anyone who entered, stood a magnificent grand piano. The piano was always covered with a heavy silk cloth in deep burgundy. In the 2 weeks Elena had been cleaning the mansion, she had never seen it uncovered. She'd asked the head of the cleaning service about it, and was told never to touch the piano. Mr. Blackwell was very particular about it. Elena moved around the room with her feather duster, careful not to disturb anything. She glanced occasionally at the covered piano, wondering about the instrument hidden beneath the silk. In her cleaning routine, she dusted the piano's covered surface, never lifting the cloth, running her duster gently over the smooth fabric. Victor's voice grew louder in the next room. "I don't care what their lawyers say. I want this deal closed by Friday or heads will roll." Elena continued her work, used to his outbursts by now. She moved to dust a small table near the piano and noticed a framed photo she hadn't seen before. Picking it up carefully, she saw a younger Victor standing next to an older man who shared his features. His father, perhaps. Both men wore expensive suits and stern expressions, but no warmth connected them in the image. A sudden silence from the office told Elena that Victor had finished his call. She quickly placed the photo back and continued dusting, but not before noticing sheet music tucked inside a drawer she had opened. The pages were yellowed with age. "What are you doing?" Elena turned to find Victor standing in the doorway, watching her with suspicious eyes. "Just cleaning, Mr. Blackwell," she answered, closing the drawer carefully. Victor walked into the room, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. "Were you going through my things?" "No, sir. Just dusting." Drawer was already open a little. Victor approached the table and yanked the drawer open. He looked at the old sheet music inside, then slammed it shut. "This room doesn't need much cleaning. Just dust and go." Elena nodded, but couldn't help asking, "The piano is beautiful. Do you play, Mr. Blackwell?" A strange expression crossed Victor's face, something between annoyance and discomfort. "That's none of your business." "I'm sorry," Elena said quickly. The piano is for show," Victor cut her off. "Like everything else in this room." Elena looked surprised. "For show? But such beautiful instrument." "I bought it at an auction last year," Victor said, his voice taking on the smug tone he used when talking about his possessions. "Thomas Wells wanted it. You know, the tech billionaire with the ridiculous bow ties. We got into a bidding war. He stopped at $800,000. I went to $850. Victor smiled coldly at the memory. The look on his face was worth every penny. Elena tried to hide her shock at the amount. $850,000 for an instrument that no one played, that sat covered in an empty room. "It must be very special piano," she said quietly. "It's a Bosendorfer Imperial Grand, one of the best in the world," Victor replied, his tone making it clear he was reciting information rather than speaking from knowledge. "Belonged to some famous pianist or composer or something." The auction catalog had all the details. He waved his hand dismissively. "Not that it matters. It's an investment piece." Elena nodded, though her eyes lingered on the covered shape. Victor noticed her gaze and frowned. "Don't get any ideas about touching it," he warned. "It stays covered always." "Yes, Mr. Blackwell," Elena replied, returning to her dusting. But as Victor left the room, she couldn't help whispering to herself, "Such a shame." The next few days brought unusual activity to the mansion. Victor was hosting an important business dinner on Friday evening, and the house was filled with deliveries and preparations. Caterers came to inspect the kitchen. Florists measured spaces for elaborate arrangements, and Victor himself seemed constantly on edge, barking orders into his phone. On Thursday, Elena arrived to find the house in chaos. Extra cleaning staff had been called in, and a stern-faced woman in a tailored suit was directing everyone with military precision. "You must be the regular cleaner," the woman said when she spotted Elena. "I'm Diane, Mr. Blackwell's executive assistant. You'll be helping with final preparations tomorrow before the event." Elena nodded. "Yes, I can stay extra hours if needed." Diane consulted her tablet. "Good. The music room needs special attention. Mr. Blackwell has hired a pianist for tomorrow evening and everything must be perfect." Elena's heart beat a little faster. "A pianist? For the grand piano?" "Yes, someone from the city symphony. They'll be playing background music during cocktails." Diane looked up from her tablet. "Mr. Blackwell specifically mentioned that you're to help prepare the room, but not to touch the piano itself. The rental company will send someone to tune it tomorrow afternoon." All day, Elena cleaned with extra care, knowing important guests would be examining every corner of the house. As she worked, she thought about the covered piano finally being played. She wondered what music would fill this cold house, if it might somehow warm these rooms that felt more like a museum than a home. Friday morning came and Elena arrived early. The house was already buzzing with activity. Caterers setting up in the kitchen, florists bringing in massive arrangements of exotic flowers, technicians adjusting lighting and sound systems. In the music room, two men in uniforms were carefully removing the silk cover from the piano. Elena paused in the doorway, catching her breath at the sight of the instrument revealed. It was magnificent, gleaming black with an extra-long keyboard and intricate detailing on the legs. Even after months undercover, it seemed to glow with an inner light. One of the men opened the lid, propping it up to reveal the strings inside. The other began the tuning process, striking keys and making minute adjustments. Elena watched from a respectful distance as she cleaned the bookshelves, stealing glances at the beautiful instrument. "Excuse me," she said when they paused in their work. "May I ask about this piano?" Mr. Blackwell said it belonged to someone famous. The older tuner nodded. This was Anton Rubinstein's personal instrument for nearly a decade, one of the greatest pianists and composers of the Romantic era. He ran his hand reverently along the edge. "A piano like this has a soul, you know. It remembers the hands that have played it." Elena nodded, understanding completely. "It's been covered since I started working here. No one plays it." The man shook his head sadly. "Such a waste. These instruments need to be played, like people need to breathe." He struck a single key, letting the note hang in the air. "At least it will sing tonight." After the tuners left, Elena continued preparing the room. She polished the hardwood floors until they shone, arranged fresh flowers on side tables, and made sure everything was spotless. All the while, the uncovered piano seemed to watch her, its presence filling the room in a way the covered shape never had. At noon, Victor stormed into the music room, his face tight with anger. He was on the phone again. "What do you mean he can't make it? The dinner's in 6 hours. He listened for a moment, then swore loudly. "Food poisoning? Are you serious? Can't he just—" Another pause. "Fine, find me a replacement, anyone." He hung up and noticed Elena standing near the window. "What are you looking at?" he snapped. "Nothing, sir. Just cleaning," Elena replied quietly. Victor ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up slightly. The pianist canceled. Some nonsense about being sick. He paced around the room. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to find a classical pianist on a Friday afternoon?" Elena remained silent, continuing to wipe down the windowsill. Victor's phone rang again and he answered immediately. "Please tell me you found someone." His face fell as he listened. "No, absolutely not. I need someone with credentials. These are important people coming tonight." Another pause. "Keep trying." After hanging up, Victor stared at the piano, now uncovered and gleaming in the afternoon light. "Perfect," he muttered. "The centerpiece of the cocktail hour, and no one to play it." Elena finished the window and moved to dust a bookshelf, keeping her eyes lowered. Victor continued to pace, making more calls, his frustration growing with each one. By 4 o'clock, with guests due to arrive at 6, he seemed ready to explode. "Sir, Elena said softly as she gathered her cleaning supplies, preparing to leave. I could help, maybe. Victor turned to her, his expression incredulous. You, what could you possibly do? Elena hesitated, then said, I know someone who plays piano. Very well. Really? Victor's tone was skeptical. And this person could be here in... He checked his watch. Less than 2 hours, dressed appropriately, and play at a level that wouldn't embarrass me in front of the CEO of Global Finance Group? Yes, Elena said simply. Victor laughed, a short, harsh sound without humor. Let me guess, your cousin's neighbor's uncle once took lessons? Elena's cheeks flushed slightly, but she met his eyes. No, sir. Someone who plays very beautifully. Classical music like your guests would enjoy. Victor looked at her for a long moment, then at the silent piano. His phone rang again, and he checked the screen before declining the call. Your cleaning service said you were reliable, he said finally. If you're playing some kind of joke... No joke, Mr. Blackwell, I promise. Victor sighed heavily. Fine, I don't have many options left. Tell this person to be here by 5:30, dressed formally. There's a black suit in the guest room closet if it's a man, or... He waved his hand vaguely. Figure something out if it's a woman. 1 hour of cocktail music. Nothing experimental or modern. Understood? Elena nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Understood, Mr. Blackwell. As she walked toward the door, Victor called after her. If this goes badly, don't bother coming back on Monday. Elena paused, looking back at him with that same quiet dignity he had noticed on her first day. It won't go badly, she said with a certainty that surprised him. The piano will sing tonight. By 5 o'clock, Victor's mansion buzzed with final preparations. Staff in black and white uniforms moved efficiently through the rooms, arranging glasses, adjusting flowers, and lighting candles. Victor himself stood in the grand entryway, supervising the placement of ice sculptures shaped like his company's logo. The lighting is all wrong, he snapped at a young man adjusting spotlights. I want them to sparkle, not melt. Fix it. His phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Caterers ready. Bartenders in position. Still no word on pianist replacement. Victor frowned. He'd almost forgotten about the pianist problem, having been distracted by a dozen other crises throughout the afternoon. The cleaning lady, Elena, had left hours ago after making her strange offer. He doubted she'd actually come through. Who did she know that could possibly play at the level his guests would expect? Just as he was about to text Diane to forget about the music entirely, the front doorbell rang. One of the staff hurried to answer it. Mr. Blackwell? The young server called. Someone here about the piano? Victor turned, expecting to see some amateur musician Elena had dragged in from the street. Instead, he saw Elena herself standing in the doorway holding a small bag. What are you doing here? He demanded, walking over. Where's the pianist you promised? Elena looked different. She'd changed out of her cleaning uniform into a simple but elegant black dress. Her hair, usually pulled back tightly for work, now fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked younger somehow and carried herself with unexpected grace. I'm here to help with the piano, she said quietly. Victor stared at her, his confusion turning to anger as he realized what she meant. You're the pianist? Elena nodded. Yes, Mr. Blackwell. Victor let out a sharp laugh. Several staff members glanced over curiously. This is ridiculous. I need a professional musician, not my cleaning lady pretending to play chopsticks. I can play what your guests would enjoy, Elena said, her voice steady despite Victor's mockery. Classical pieces. Chopin, Liszt, Beethoven. Whatever you prefer. This isn't a joke, Victor hissed, pulling her aside into a small alcove away from the staff's curious eyes. I have the CEO of Global Finance Group coming tonight. The woman who runs the largest tech company in Asia. People who can make or break my business with a single word. I understand, Elena replied. That's why I came to help. Victor ran his hand through his hair in frustration. Look, I appreciate the offer, but this is absurd. You clean houses for a living. A flicker of something, pride perhaps or determination, flashed in Elena's eyes. Yes, I clean houses. That doesn't mean I can't also play piano. Victor checked his watch. 5:20. Guests would arrive in 40 minutes and he had no alternative. He closed his eyes briefly, weighing his options. Fine, he said finally, opening his eyes. Play something now. If it's good enough, you can stay. If not, you leave immediately. Elena nodded. The music room? Yes. They walked in tense silence to the music room where the magnificent Bosendorfer gleamed under perfect lighting. Elena approached it with reverence, running her hand lightly along its edge before sitting on the bench. Victor stood with his arms crossed, expecting to end this charade in seconds. "Go ahead," he said coldly. Elena adjusted the bench slightly, then placed her hands over the keys. She paused, took a deep breath, and began to play. The opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the room. The gentle melody flowed from Elena's fingers with such delicacy that Victor found himself holding his breath. Her touch was light yet confident, bringing out nuances in the piece he'd never noticed when hearing it played by others. As the music built, Elena's hands moved across the keyboard with practiced ease. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, her face transformed by complete absorption in the music. The piece grew in complexity, and she handled the challenging passages with precision and emotion that spoke of years of training and natural talent. When the final notes faded, Victor stood frozen, unable to speak. Elena turned to look at him, a question in her eyes. "How?" he began, then cleared his throat. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Before Elena could answer, Diane appeared in the doorway. "Victor, the first guests are arriving early. The Montgomerys are already pulling up the driveway." Victor looked at his watch. How had 10 minutes passed so quickly? He'd been lost in the music. "Fine," he said to Elena, his voice carefully controlled. "You can play tonight. Cocktail music for 1 hour, nothing too showy. Understand?" Elena nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Yes, Mr. Blackwell, thank you." Victor straightened his tie and followed Diane to greet his guests, still shaken by what he'd heard. He pushed the confusion aside, focusing on becoming the charming host his business associates expected. Within half an hour, the mansion filled with the elite of the business world. Men and women in expensive evening wear sipped champagne and traded insider gossip, while admiring Victor's art collection and panoramic city views. Victor moved among them smoothly, shaking hands, laughing at jokes, and dropping hints about upcoming ventures that sent subtle ripples through the crowd. All the while, from the music room, Elena played. She kept to background pieces at first, elegant, unobtrusive melodies that complemented the sophisticated murmur of conversation. Occasionally, Victor caught guests pausing mid-sentence, turning slightly toward the music with appreciative expressions. "Exceptional pianist you've hired." "Victor," commented William Chen, CEO of Global Finance Group. "Conservatory trained?" "Of course," Victor replied smoothly, uncomfortable with the lie but unwilling to admit the truth. "Only the best for my guests." As the cocktail hour progressed, more guests drifted toward the music room, drawn by Elena's playing. She had transitioned to more complex pieces, a Schubert impromptu followed by Chopin's waltz in C-sharp minor. Her technique was flawless, but it was the emotion in her playing that captivated the listeners. Each piece told a story, conveyed feelings that mere words couldn't express. Victor found himself standing in the doorway of the music room, watching both Elena and his guests. The room had filled with listeners, champagne glasses in hand, many with closed eyes as they let the music wash over them. Elena seemed unaware of her audience, lost in her own world as her fingers danced across the keys. "She's remarkable," whispered Diane, appearing at Victor's side. "Where did you find her?" Victor didn't answer. He was watching Elena's face as she played, the absolute peace there, the joy that radiated from her usually reserved features. She looked like a different person entirely, transformed by the music she created. When she finished a particularly moving rendition of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, the room burst into spontaneous applause. Elena looked up startled, as if only now realizing how many people had gathered to listen. A flush spread across her cheeks as she nodded in acknowledgement. During a brief pause between pieces, an older gentleman made his way to the piano. Victor recognized him as Thomas Reynolds, director of the city's symphony orchestra. "My dear," Reynolds said to Elena, his voice carrying in the suddenly quiet room, "your technique is extraordinary. That Rachmaninoff was played with more feeling than I've heard in years. Are you currently with an orchestra?" Elena's eyes flickered to Victor before she answered. "No, sir. I play only privately now." "That's a crime against music," Reynolds declared, turning to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're in the presence of a true artist tonight. More applause followed, with guests nodding in agreement. Victor stood frozen, watching as his cleaning lady received the kind of admiration usually reserved for celebrated performers. "Do you take requests?" asked a woman in a red dress, stepping forward. "Of course," Elena replied with a warm smile, a smile Victor had never seen before. "What would you like to hear?" "Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, if you know it," the woman said. It was my father's favorite. Several people exchanged glances. It was one of the most technically challenging pieces in the piano repertoire, famous for its difficulty. "I'd be happy to play it," Elena said simply, positioning her hands once more. From the first thundering notes, it was clear this would be different from the earlier, more delicate pieces. Elena's hands flew across the keyboard with astonishing speed and precision. The famous melody built and transformed, her fingers a blur during the most demanding passages. Her whole body seemed part of the performance now, no longer the reserved woman who cleaned in silence. The room fell completely still except for the music that filled every corner. Even the servers had stopped to listen, trays held motionless. Victor found himself gripping the doorframe, watching Elena command the magnificent instrument as if she'd been born to play it. When she struck the final triumphant chord, there was a moment of awed silence before the room erupted in enthusiastic applause and cheers. Elena rose from the bench and gave a small, graceful bow. Thomas Reynolds pushed forward again. "Extraordinary. Simply extraordinary. My dear, I must have your name. The symphony has been searching for a soloist of your caliber for our winter season." "Elena Vasquez," she replied, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly from the exertion of the piece. "Ms. Vasquez," Reynolds continued, pulling a card from his pocket. "Please call my office tomorrow." "I insist." Victor watched this exchange in stunned silence. Guests were gathering around Elena now, asking questions, offering compliments, treating her like one of them, rather than the woman who had dusted their host's bookshelves hours earlier. "Victor," called William Chen from across the room, "you've been holding out on us. Why didn't you mention your pianist as a virtuoso?" All eyes turned to Victor, waiting for his response. He looked at Elena, who met his gaze with quiet dignity. In that moment, something shifted between them, a rebalancing of power, a shattering of assumptions. Victor walked slowly to the piano, aware of the watching crowd. "Elena has many talents," he said carefully. "I'm still discovering them myself." The dinner bell rang, saving him from further explanation. As guests began moving toward the dining room, Victor found himself standing alone with Elena by the piano. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. Elena closed the piano lid with gentle hands. "You never asked Mr. Blackwell," she replied. "And I needed the job." Before Victor could respond, Diane appeared to usher them to dinner. "Everyone's waiting," she said. "And Elena, Mr. Reynolds has requested you join the table. He's quite insistent." Elena looked uncertainly at Victor. For the first time that evening, he saw a glimpse of the hesitant cleaning lady beneath the confident pianist. "Go," he said, surprising himself. "You've earned a seat at the table tonight." As they walked toward the dining room, Victor noticed the straight back, the lifted chin, the natural elegance that had been there all along, hidden beneath a cleaner's uniform and his own blindness to seeing it. The dinner that followed Elena's performance was unlike any Victor had ever hosted. Usually these events followed a predictable pattern: business talk disguised as casual conversation, subtle power plays, and strategic networking. Tonight, however, all anyone wanted to discuss was Elena and her extraordinary talent. "Where did you study?" asked Thomas Reynolds, the symphony director, as waiters served the main course. "Your technique reminds me of the Moscow Conservatory approach." Elena, seated between Reynolds and a venture capitalist, looked surprisingly at ease despite the sudden change in her circumstances. "I studied at the National Conservatory in Mexico City," she answered. "Later I had private instruction from Maestro Domingo Ortiz." Reynolds nearly dropped his fork. "Domingo Ortiz? The legendary Ortiz? He rarely accepts students." "He was a friend of my family," Elena explained. "He said I had a natural feel for the emotional landscape of the music." From his position at the head of the table, Victor listened in growing disbelief. The cleaning lady who had dusted his shelves and polished his floors for weeks was casually discussing world-class musical education and dropping names that clearly impressed the cultured people around his table. William Chen leaned toward Victor. You've been keeping secrets, old friend, he said with a meaningful look. Your pianist is clearly a major talent. Is she performing anywhere else currently? Victor took a sip of wine, buying time. Elena is selective about her performances, he said carefully, avoiding an outright lie. Further down the table, the conversation had shifted. But why aren't you performing professionally? A woman in designer jewelry asked Elena. With your skill, you could be playing concert halls worldwide. A shadow passed over Elena's face. Life takes unexpected turns sometimes, she said quietly. I came to this country 5 years ago with different plans. Victor found himself leaning forward slightly, curious to spite himself. My country experienced political changes, Elena continued after a brief hesitation. The new government cut arts funding completely. The conservatory where I taught was closed. Many musicians left. You were a teacher as well? Reynolds asked. Elena nodded. Piano professor for 8 years. I also performed with the National Symphony. I thought your name sounded familiar, an older woman said suddenly. Elena Vasquez. Weren't you the soloist on that recording of Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1 with the Mexico City Philharmonic about 7 years ago? Elena's eyes widened slightly. Yes, that was me. I have that recording. It's magnificent. The woman turned to the others. She received standing ovations for 5 minutes straight at Carnegie Hall that year. Victor nearly choked on his wine. Carnegie Hall? The woman who scrubbed his bathrooms had played at Carnegie Hall. The dinner continued, with Elena reluctantly sharing more pieces of her past in response to the guests' interested questions. She had been a celebrated concert pianist in her home country, had toured internationally, recorded 3 classical albums, and taught at the prestigious National Conservatory. What brought you to the United States? Someone asked. Elena's expression grew more guarded. Political situation became difficult. Some artists who spoke out against government policies faced consequences. I had my daughter to think about. Your daughter? Reynolds asked. A genuine smile lit Elena's face. Lucia, she's 16 now. Very smart girl, studies hard, loves mathematics. And does she play piano too? A guest inquired. Yes, though she prefers science and numbers. She wants to be an engineer, Elena said proudly. As the dinner progressed, Victor found it increasingly difficult to reconcile the Elena at his table. Confident, articulate, clearly educated and accomplished, with the quiet woman who had cleaned his home without complaint despite his rude behavior. He felt strangely disconnected from the conversation, like a visitor at his own dinner party. When dessert was served, Reynolds turned the conversation toward business. Elena, the symphony has been searching for a piano soloist for our winter season. After hearing you play, I'm convinced you're exactly what we've been looking for. Would you consider auditioning? It would be a formality, of course. The table fell silent, all eyes on Elena. She looked momentarily overwhelmed, a mixture of longing and hesitation crossing her face. I don't know what to say, she finally responded. It's been years since I performed professionally. Your talent clearly hasn't diminished, Reynolds assured her. If anything, there's a depth to your playing now that comes only with life experience. Elena glanced briefly at Victor, as if seeking something, permission perhaps, or reassurance. He found himself nodding slightly, unsure why his opinion should matter to her at all. I would be honored to audition, she said to Reynolds, her voice gaining strength. Thank you for the opportunity. Reynolds beamed. Wonderful. I'll have my assistant contact you tomorrow with the details. As coffee was served, the conversation broke into smaller groups. Victor excused himself briefly and stepped out onto the terrace, needing a moment alone. The cool night air helped clear his head as he tried to process the evening's revelations. Behind him, the door opened softly. He turned to see Elena stepping onto the terrace. I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Blackwell, she said. I wanted to thank you for allowing me to play tonight. Victor studied her in the dim light. She stood differently now, shoulders back, head high, the posture of someone accustomed to stages and spotlights rather than mops and dusters. Why? He asked abruptly. Why are you cleaning houses when you could be playing concerts? Elena moved to the stone railing, looking out at the city lights below. When we first came here, I tried to continue my career, but without proper documentation, connections, it was impossible to get orchestra positions. A few private students, yes, but not enough to live on. She sighed softly. Cleaning pays the bills. It lets me keep Lucia in good school, save for her college. But surely there were other options for someone with your background. Some doors stay closed, Mr. Blackwell, no matter how hard you knock. Elena's voice held no self-pity, just simple truth. And some sacrifices are worth making. Lucia has opportunities here she wouldn't have had back home. Victor felt a strange discomfort settle in his chest. He thought of all the times he'd spoken condescendingly to this woman, dismissed her, treated her as invisible. All while she carried this whole other life, this extraordinary talent, this history of accomplishment silently within her. Does anyone else know? He asked. At the cleaning service? Elena shook her head. No one asks about our lives before. We are just the people who clean. She turned to face him fully. That's why I was surprised when you let me play tonight. Most people in your position wouldn't have taken the risk. I needed a pianist, Victor said, his voice rough. It was a business decision. Elena smiled slightly. Of course. From inside, the sound of laughter and conversation drifted out. Elena glanced at the door. I should go back in. Mr. Reynolds wants to discuss the audition details. As she turned to leave, Victor found himself asking, Why did you tell me you knew someone who could play? Why not just say it was you? Elena paused. Would you have believed me if I had? The question hung in the air between them, uncomfortable in its truth. Before Victor could answer, Diane appeared at the door. Victor, the Chens are preparing to leave. And Elena, Mr. Reynolds is looking for you. Elena nodded and followed Diane inside. Victor remained on the terrace a moment longer, unsettled by the question she'd left unanswered. When he rejoined the party, he found most guests preparing to depart, full of compliments about the evening. Several mentioned Elena specifically, expressing delight at having discovered such a talented musician. You've been keeping her all to yourself, William Chen said as Victor walked him to the door. Smart business move, having a world-class pianist as your private performer. Very impressive, Victor didn't correct him. He merely nodded and thanked Chen for coming. By midnight, the house was empty except for the catering staff cleaning up. Victor found Elena in the music room, gently closing the lid of the piano. Your guests have gone? She asked, turning at his footsteps. Yes. Victor moved further into the room, stopping near the piano. It was a successful evening. I'm glad. Elena gathered her small bag. I should go too. Lucia will be waiting up. Does she know? Victor asked suddenly. Your daughter, does she know who you were? Who you are? Elena's expression softened. She knows. She's heard the recordings, seen the old concert programs I keep, but to her I'm just Mama. She smiled. Children are wonderfully unimpressed by such things. The symphony position, Victor said. If you get it, will you quit the cleaning service? The symphony season is only part of the year, and the pay for new soloists is not very high. Elena replied practically. I would still need other work. Victor nodded, processing this. I see. An awkward silence fell between them, neither quite knowing how to navigate this new territory. Elena was no longer just the cleaning lady, but she wasn't quite an equal either. The usual power dynamic had shifted, leaving uncertainty in its place. Mr. Reynolds mentioned a community music program, Elena said finally, for children who cannot afford lessons. He thinks I might teach there as well. You'd be good at that, Victor said, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. Teaching is what I miss most, Elena admitted. Watching someone discover music for the first time, it's like watching them discover a new part of themselves. Victor thought back to the moment he'd first heard her play, how the music had seemed to transform not just her, but the room itself, filling the cold space with something warm and alive. Will you still come on Tuesday? He asked, the question coming out more vulnerable than he'd intended. To clean, I mean. Elena studied him for a moment. Yes, if you still want me to. Good, Victor said, then added awkwardly. I mean, you do a thorough job. A small smile touched Elena's lips, suggesting she understood what he wasn't saying. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. Good night. Good night, Ms. Vasquez, Victor replied, using her surname for the first time. After she left, Victor remained in the music room for a long time, looking at the piano that had revealed a truth he'd been too blind to see. The house felt different somehow, the room still large and luxurious, but the silence more noticeable now that it had been filled with music and then emptied again. He ran his hand along the edge of the piano, thinking about Elena's words about teaching and discovery. She had spent weeks in his home, seeing him at his worst, witnessing his arrogance and dismissiveness. Yet tonight she had shown no bitterness, no desire for revenge or humiliation. She had simply played her music, answered questions honestly, and treated everyone, including him, with dignity. Victor thought about the way he'd built his life, the constant striving for more, the collecting of expensive things to impress others, the measuring of worth by bank balances and business deals. He'd achieved everything he'd set out to accomplish. Yet something about Elena's quiet confidence, her obvious peace with herself despite circumstances that had taken her from concert halls to cleaning floors, made him wonder what he might have missed along the way. For the first time in years, Victor Blackwell felt something shift inside him, a small crack in the hard shell of certainty he'd built around himself, letting in a sliver of doubt about whether he'd been right all along. The Tuesday following the dinner party, Victor found himself glancing at the clock more often than usual. Elena was scheduled to clean at 9, and for the first time he felt awkward about the arrangement. How do you treat someone who scrubs your toilets in the morning and plays Carnegie Hall-worthy piano in the evening? At precisely 9, the doorbell rang. Victor had deliberately positioned himself in the living room instead of his usual spot in the home office. He wanted to see her arrival, though he wasn't entirely sure why. Elena entered wearing her blue cleaning uniform, hair pulled back in its practical bun, carrying her familiar tote of supplies. If not for the events of Friday night, nothing would have suggested she was anything other than what she appeared to be. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell," she said politely. "Good morning, Ms. Vasquez," he replied, using her last name again, a small acknowledgement of their changed dynamic. An awkward silence stretched between them. "I'll start upstairs today, if that's all right," Elena finally said. "The guest rooms needed extra attention after the party." "Of course." Victor hesitated, then added, "Did Mr. Reynolds contact you? About the audition?" A small smile touched Elena's lips. "Yes, it's scheduled for Thursday afternoon." That's good, very good." Elena nodded and moved toward the stairs. Victor watched her go, noticing for the first time the grace in her movements that he'd previously overlooked, the same poise that had been so evident when she played the piano. Instead of retreating to his office as usual, Victor found himself wandering through the house as Elena cleaned, attempting casual conversation whenever their paths crossed. "How long have you been playing piano?" he asked as she dusted the living room shelves. "Since I was 5, she answered, reaching for a crystal vase. "My mother taught piano to neighborhood children. She started me with simple songs, but by 8 I was playing Beethoven." Victor nodded, trying to imagine Elena as a child, her small fingers stretching to reach the keys. "And your daughter, Lucia, she plays too?" "Yes, though not with the same passion. She enjoys it, but her heart belongs to science and mathematics. Last year she won a regional competition for a robot she designed." "That's impressive," Victor said, genuinely interested. "What kind of robot?" "One that helps elderly people pick up things they drop without having to bend down," Elena explained, pride evident in her voice. "Her grandmother, my mother, has arthritis, and Lucia wanted to help her." Throughout the morning, these small exchanges continued. Victor learned more about Elena's life, how she had shown extraordinary talent as a child, earned a scholarship to the conservatory, built a career performing internationally while teaching at the university level, and how when the political climate changed and arts funding was cut, she had spoken out publicly, resulting in threats that eventually forced her to leave with teenage Lucia. "We came with tourist visas," she explained as she prepared to leave that afternoon. "When they expired, we stayed. Going back wasn't an option, and the official paths to remain legally were closed to us." Victor found himself uncomfortable with these revelations, not because of Elena's undocumented status, but because they challenged his previous assumptions about immigrants and their reasons for coming to America. "Your English is very good," he observed. "Better than it seemed at first." Elena gave him a knowing look. "People expect a certain broken English from cleaners. It's easier sometimes to meet their expectations than to make them question their assumptions." Her words struck Victor like a physical blow, forcing him to confront his own behavior. He had never bothered to really see the woman who cleaned his house, had assumed her capability matched her occupation, had treated her as a function rather than a person. "I've been unfair to you," he said abruptly. "The way I spoke to you, the things I said." "I'm sorry," Elena's expression softened. "You weren't the worst, Mr. Blackwell. At least you always paid on time. The bar was so low that it should have made Victor feel worse, but her matter-of-fact forgiveness somehow made it possible for him to face his shame directly. "Will you be at the audition on Thursday?" she asked as she gathered her things. "Would you like me to be?" Elena considered this. "Yes," she said finally. "I think I would." Thursday afternoon found Victor sitting in the back row of a small auditorium at the Symphony Center. He had rescheduled an important business meeting to be there, something he would have considered unthinkable just a week earlier. The audition panel consisted of Thomas Reynolds and 4 other serious-looking people with clipboards. Elena walked onto the stage wearing a simple black dress, not the cleaning uniform but not fancy concert attire either. Something in between, like she was herself. Victor watched as she took her place at the grand piano, adjusting the bench with the same careful movements he'd observed in his music room. She spoke briefly with Reynolds, who nodded and made a note on his clipboard. When Elena began to play, the transformation was immediate and complete. Her first piece was Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, a challenging work that she performed with technical perfection and emotional depth that left the auditorium in reverent silence. She followed with a Bach prelude that showcased her precise control, then finished with Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, accompanied by a staff pianist playing the orchestral reduction. Victor found himself holding his breath during the most difficult passages, though he knew from Friday's performance that she would navigate them flawlessly. What struck him most was not her technical skill, impressive as it was, but the way the music seemed to flow through her, as if she were not just playing the notes but revealing something essential about human experience. When she finished, the small audience of staff and musicians broke into spontaneous applause. Reynolds was beaming, already in conversation with his colleagues on the panel. Victor could tell from their animated gestures that the decision was a foregone conclusion. He slipped out before Elena could see him, suddenly feeling like an intruder in this world where she so clearly belonged. He needed time to think, to process the changes happening within him. The following Tuesday, Elena arrived at her usual time. Victor met her at the door. "You don't need to clean today," he said immediately. Elena's face fell slightly. "You're letting me go? No." "No, that's not what I meant," Victor hurried to clarify. "I thought we might talk instead. I have a proposition for you." He led her to the kitchen, not the formal dining room or his office, but the kitchen, where they could sit as equals at the island counter. He had prepared coffee himself, something he rarely did. "I heard from Thomas Reynolds," Victor began, pushing a mug toward her. He was very impressed. "The position is yours if you want it." Elena's face lit up. "Yes, he called me yesterday. The winter season begins in 6 weeks. I'll be performing the Tchaikovsky concerto." "That's wonderful," Victor said sincerely. "But it brings me to my proposition. I've been thinking about your situation, about Lucia and her education, about your teaching background." He took a deep breath. "I want to establish a music foundation for underprivileged children who can't afford lessons or instruments, and I want you to run it." Elena stared at him, clearly stunned. "A foundation? But why?" "Because talent shouldn't be wasted," Victor replied. "Because music matters, because—" He hesitated, then continued honestly, "because I need to do something that actually helps people, not just makes money." He explained his vision. A program that would provide instruments, lessons, and performance opportunities to children who couldn't otherwise afford them. Elena would be the artistic director, with a salary that reflected her expertise and experience. The position would work around her symphony schedule and provide the stability she needed. "And there's more," Victor continued. "I've spoken with my lawyer about your immigration situation. There are pathways for artists of extraordinary ability. With your background and the new symphony position, you qualify. He can help with the paperwork for both you and Lucia." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do this for me?" Victor considered the question carefully. "I'm not doing it for you," he said finally. "I'm doing it because of you. You showed me something I'd forgotten, that true worth isn't measured by what we own or how much money we make. It's measured by what we give, by how we use our talents to make the world better." He smiled ruefully. "I've been successful by one measure, but failing by all the ones that really matter." Elena reached across the counter and briefly touched his hand, a simple human connection that felt more valuable than any business deal he'd ever closed. "We all have different gifts," she said. It's never too late to use them wisely. 6 months later, the city's premier concert hall was filled to capacity. On stage, Elena Vasquez, now the symphony's celebrated pianist, took her final bow after a stunning performance of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. The audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. In the front row, Victor Blackwell applauded with them, his face full of pride that had nothing to do with ownership or status. Beside him sat Lucia, now enrolled in the engineering program at the State University on a full scholarship. As Elena acknowledged the crowd's enthusiasm, she gestured toward the side of the stage. 20 children walked out, carrying various instruments, their faces nervous but excited. They were the first class of the Blackwell-Vasquez Music Foundation, preparing to join Elena for the encore, a special arrangement of a folk song from her hometown. The children took their positions around the piano. Among them were kids from the inner city, children of immigrants, youngsters who would never have touched an instrument if not for the foundation. Elena nodded to them encouragingly, then played the opening notes. As music filled the hall again, Victor watched the faces of the children, seeing in them the same transformation he'd witnessed in Elena that first night. Ordinary people revealing extraordinary gifts that had always been there, waiting for the chance to be heard. After the concert, at the reception, a reporter approached Victor. "Mr. Blackwell, your foundation has received national attention for its innovative approach to music education. What inspired you to start this program?" Victor looked across the room, where Elena was introducing her students to Thomas Reynolds and other music world luminaries. She caught his eye and smiled. A warm, genuine connection between two people who had each, in their own way, found a new path. "Let's just say I learned to listen," Victor replied. "Sometimes the most beautiful music comes from places we least expect it." Later that evening, after the crowds had gone, Elena returned to the empty stage. Victor found her there, sitting at the piano in the dimmed light of the hall, playing a quiet melody. "New composition?" he asked, taking a seat in the front row. Elena nodded. "It's called Second Chances. What do you think?" As the gentle notes filled the space between them, Victor closed his eyes and truly listened, not just to the music, but to the message within it. Of humble beginnings and unexpected journeys, of seeing beyond appearances to the gifts that lie beneath, of the transformative power of recognizing the value in others and in ourselves. "I think," he said when she finished, "that it's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard."